Every who down in Who Newville liked the holidays a ton. But where to get great prices on gifts, they had no idea. None. They searched and they searched for great gifts under $25. Gifts for spouses and friends and even their toddlers. When suddenly one who shouted, Walmart has what you want, knowing they have Lego, Tree Hut, and no prices to flaunt. So they enjoy the holiday season as who's often do. Cheering and shouting, Walmart has incredible gifts. Who knew? Find gifts they'll love under $25 at Walmart.
Hello, I'm Diane Morgan. If you know who I am, you know who I am. If you don't, who cares? I'm here to explain Italian Time, a holiday phenomenon where Italians throw away their clocks and gather for eternity with San Pellegrino. I've been at this party so long that I've eaten 5 courses, hugged someone's grandma twice, and been offered a job in the family restaurant. So this holiday season, make sure to bring enough San Pellegrino to last you through the meal, the after meal, and the entire goodbye ritual. San Pellegrino, holiday on Italian Time.
For me, the 2 things that I feel like we as a society do not spend enough time on, which I think are the key takeaways that we're losing sight of: community and something bigger than us, like that spirituality. And I think we're all missing that a little bit. Generalization. We have it in bits, but like it's not our focus point, right? If tomorrow you're like, Falguni, you have a choice between walking down the street and having tea with your friend or going to do a yoga workout, guess what I'm going to choose? The yoga workout, because I'm like, oh my God, I didn't get my workout. And I got to get, that's on my to-do list. And I am really interested in this. I'm really interested in when we're driving, like you have to build your tribe. You have to have your community. That's the thing that's going to keep us young, and we're going to have that longevity. I don't want to be old and decrepit and tired and whatever by myself.
There is no hood like parenthood. Hi, I'm Kanika Chadda Gupta. I'm a former CNN journalist, mom of 3, including twins, and host of That's Total Mom Sense, the podcast. Now, if I had $1 every time I heard, gee, you have your hands full. On my show, I interview change makers on their life lessons, legacy, and superpower of intuition, which I call our Mom Sense and Dad Sense. I've had the privilege of working with Mom 2.0, March of Dimes, and the White House, and have had some pretty amazing parents on my show.
Hey, what's up? I'm Kelly Rowland.
Hi, this is Chelsea Clinton. It's me, Bobby Brown. Can't wait to share my story.
That's Total Mom Sense is a production of the Evergreen Podcast Network. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube so you never miss an episode. To join my tribe, visit that'stotalmomsense.com and follow me on Instagram at Kanika Chadda Gupta. Now let's dive into today's episode.
It's not every day that you meet someone who's charting a very parallel path to your own life, but when you do, it is sheer serendipity, divine intervention, kismet, whatever you want to call it. And that's how I feel about my guest today. She is the big sister I've always wanted, the ultimate Didi, and she became that from our first conversation. Falguni Lakhani Adams is an Emmy Award-winning producer and executive with Vice TV, a multi-hyphenate mom, director, writer, spiritual speaker, mindfulness coach, and entrepreneur. She's produced shows including United Shades of America with W. Kamau Bell for CNN, series for Yahoo, Amazon Originals, and Comedy Central, and the popular 9 Lives of and Sex Before the Internet on Vice. She's a board member of the Hollywood Radio and Television Society, founding member of Marble Collective, has a production company called Sorry Not Sorry, and is the co-creator of Getting Hotter, a social impact project that aims to empower women and girls through storytelling and education. And to top it off, she's a devoted wife to her husband and lifelong sweetheart, Richard, and their 2 kids. Falguni Didi, we're making this happen. Thank you for joining me on That's Total Mom Sense.
Thank you for having me. That's an intro. I'm like, I like that person.
He's so cool.
But the fact that we're leading parallel lives can only mean that you're cool too.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Well, let's start there because we're both born in Bombay. We're both empaths. We're just girls. We need to have this tribe around us. But let's start from those early days in India.
My parents basically took me back to meet my grandmother. And so they wanted me to be there to meet my grandmother. And so I was there by myself, actually. My dad ended up having to leave me there with my grandmother for my first 2 years of life, which I don't really remember, but I do remember my grandmother. And I remember just being super close to her. And then we came back to New York, and then I went back when I was 5. And then I went back when I was 10 by myself with my cousins, and I went to school in Bangalore for a year. Right? They didn't have, like, my son's on a trip. This is his first sleepaway trip for 4 days in Seattle, and I was freaking out. Like, I did all the crazy auntie, like, I would call them auntie moves of like packing all these plain snacks and writing him a note. And he's like, Mom, I'm chill. I'm good. What's up? And I was like, and he has a phone and he can text me and I can see all the charges coming through. And it's sort of like, you get it. You talk to moms, like at a certain point, I'm like, I'm a helicopter. I'm like a recovering or recuperating helicopter mom or something. I don't know. I need to stop.
No, you don't. You don't. I love that you have this really special bond with your kids. And it's something that we can forge because, our upbringing and mentality is a little different from, the previous generations and those who had to sacrifice everything to immigrate here. We get it. We've done homecoming, prom, college, like we get it. So I'm excited for when my kids are going to be teenagers.
It's stressful. And actually it's an interesting, because I know you want to talk about getting hotter. It's an interesting segue in the sense that like my son is going through puberty, but doesn't like want to talk about it. My daughter is absolutely prepubescent, if not like on the verge of getting her period. And here I am with like basically zero hormones shooting through me. And like, I'm in menopause. And the amount of, first of all, PTSD that I get just like listening to my daughter or watching her, right? Where you're like, okay, I know that feeling. I know why you're just mad at me for no reason. I actually know why. And there is like as empaths, right? There's like an empathetic thing where I'm like, hey, honey, I know why you're mad. And sometimes our hormones are raging through our veins and we don't know what to do with them. But since I understand what that is, let's talk about it instead of you just like slamming the door on your dad. Like the poor dad sometimes, and no bicharos. I hate it when people do that because it's always for the boys, or oh, bicharo. I'm like, what about bichari? But you know what I mean? Like, I do feel bad for my husband in the sense that like, he's like, why is she so mean to me?
Like, right. Where is it coming from? I wanted to just touch on, there's this power of the pivot that you've spoken about, because you were a prosecutor and you totally upturned your entire career trajectory to go into broadcast. I love that you did that because, we grew up in a time where Walter Cronkite and Barbara Walters and Connie Chung were like in our homes and they were household names every day. You made sure that you were in that world and it was a circuitous way to get there, but you did it. So how did news kind of manifest in your life?
I never was a traditional person. And lately I've been like really thinking about this because my brothers are doctors. They married doctors. They married Indian. They did all the right things, right? And then there was me. And I don't want to say I did the wrong things because I do think we spend a lot of time in our society like saying something's right and something's wrong. But I didn't do the traditional things, right? And I went into law because my parents gave me that choice of like, you can become a doctor, a lawyer, dentist, or an engineer. And I was like, well, what seems like the most creative? Probably law, because at least I could write. And I always loved writing, but I always loved justice, and I do think that that's still like sort of a common thread of everything I do in life. Like when things don't feel like they're fair or equitable, or when someone's rights are not being, honored, I absolutely get triggered and into activation mode. So that's always been a through line. And I think journalism and news definitely has a thread of that for sure, because you're sort of actively trying to tell someone's story. But anyway, I became a lawyer, and as I do most things, I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to become a lawyer, I want to be an international lawyer. I want to travel the world and fight for the rights of, mostly South Asia is where my head went, because I had written a lot of papers in college on the caste system and sort of the antiquated cultural norms that are accepted in India versus the law catching up to what that is, and on an international scope of like the UN not always wanting to step in because some of these things are considered cultural norms. So anyway, this was my big grand master plan. Did all the work for it. Interned at the United Nations, worked in an immigration law firm. I mean, I literally was like, I'm all in. And then I went to law school and I was sort of all out. I never really enjoyed it, but I became a prosecutor in Brooklyn and I tried to do some DV work because that was my passion too. And it was just depressing. And then so I was working at this place called thelaw.com, which I think it went out of existence like the year I started and the year I left. But Ed Koch had started it and it was kind of cool. It was like, let's take big legal concepts like lemon laws and whatever and explain them to people. And so as I was working there, I was like, this is kind of cool, making things digestible for other people who don't always understand technical things. And I was like, I got to do some soul searching because I wasn't enjoying law at all. And so a guy I was dating, I hate to like give credit to a guy I was dating because I'm not dating him anymore, but a guy I was dating was like, I could see you being the next Barbara Walters. How come you've never considered that? Like, you're so good at interviewing people and getting people to share their stories. And I was like, huh. And so I honestly started cold calling. I started cold calling like every single organization. I went to NBC first, and they had this thing called the news diversity program. And it was for people like us who used to have a career and wanted to do something else. So I was accepted into the program, but then the program was on pause. But the woman was like, hey, listen, there's like a PA position available at MSNBC. Why don't you go apply? So I went in. It was 2001, and I went in to interview. And it was wild, actually, when I look back, because they made me write a 10-page paper on why Hardball's a good show and a 10-page paper on what I would do differently with MSNBC. But I got the job, and I was the oldest one in my crew. And I know, it was wild. But yeah. So I started working at MSNBC in June of 2001 as a production assistant in my navy blue suit and my heels to work every day.
That's brilliant. I love it. I didn't know I wanted to do broadcast journalism until later on. Like, I was in my mid-20s when I did my master's, and was fortunate that my professor, Sam Roberts, had been at CBS for 30 years, and he was the EP for Walter Cronkite, Dan Rather, Mike Wallace. Like, it was like legend. And I feel like that was it for me. I was like, wow, I'm so glad that I'm here. And I think it's important that we pass this on to the next generation, that you got to be scrappy. You got to eat the humble pie, just do the things. If you're doing it later on in life, like, so be it. Same thing. I got an assignment as a producer and I took it. I was like, this is my open door, going out on the field, working late, just not only managing the rundown, but also being a correspondent. And so when an anchor position opened, they were like, you can, audition for it. But I got it. And it was, I think, because I knew the ins and outs of the newsroom, I knew exactly what the EP needed as far as my takes when I was recording those anchor links. And it was just like so seamless. Same for you. It's like you worked your way up the ranks the old school way, but there's something to be said about that we need this, Gen Zers to get on board and understand.
You're right. Like, we definitely went the traditional path. And my whole thing was, look, first of all, obviously I did not become the next Barbara Walters, but what I did do was say, I'm going to go in there and I need to learn sort of how what the mechanics of the computer are before I operate the computer. Right. And then in that process, I was like, actually, I like this more, or, for me. Right. And the only way for you to know that, even for you, you're like, I'm going to start here. And then you were able to transition into a thing that you knew. But the thing that you inspired for me in that, when you were sharing your journey, was we are probably the last sort of transitional generation of taking those values from our parents. The reason why you and I do that is because we were taught, you put your head down and you work really hard. Then it doesn't matter if you start at the bottom over and over again, because you just figure out a way to work your way to the top, right? Whereas that is not what even my son's generation, who's 14, right? For him, he's like, hey, mom, can you give me access to this? Hey, mom, can you put more money on my debit card? Hey, mom. And it's like, I didn't have any of that, right? Yeah. I had to like go to India by myself and like understand how the school, everyone was speaking Hindi or Kannada. And I was like, okay, I got to use my common sense. Like,
Right.
they don't know common sense in the same way. And they don't know that, like that work ethic. And we sort of got a little bit of both because we got the like means more than our families had, but we also watched them work really hard for that means.
Right. Yeah. That grit, I think we did inherit that for sure. I love your entire career trajectory. And I feel like the reason you got to do the interviews that you did or produce a series that you did is because you have this very unique skill set and knack and finesse. And one that comes to mind is, after Michael Jackson's death, like you were one of the few reporters that was given that access to cover it. So take us back to that time because that was a media freaking frenzy.
But even before he died, when he had his trial in 2005, I had built relationships with his bodyguard and with his lawyer because we were trying to, book him. We were like, whatever happens with this trial, we wanted to book him. And I do remember that Katie Couric was at NBC at the time for the Today Show, and there was all this. It was like a very competitive scene, and so I just went up to the lawyer in court. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was not a media guy. He still isn't to this day. He's my friend to this day. He's not a media guy. And I went up to him and I was like, "I'm sorry. This is my job, and it's not often the part of my job I love." But I just wanted to ask you if at some point you would consider doing an interview with us when this is all said and done. I'm going to respect your privacy, but this is what I'm asking. And he took my card because that's when we all had business cards, So I gave him my business card, like as he's trying to get through security in court in like Santa Maria, California. And he called me that night and he said, "What I really appreciated about you is that you didn't harass me. You were very direct. You were very straightforward, and you respected my privacy, and you gave me the space." And after that, we had lunch, we had dinners. I learned so much about him. And he's just a very cool lawyer too. He ended up representing a lot of other people down the road, years to come. But he gave me the first interview with, like, when Michael Jackson was acquitted. We got the first interview with Tom Mesereau, his lawyer. Katie Couric got it. And honestly, that sort of catapulted my career because I was building so many sources, and it's about sources, and it's about being a vault, and it's about keeping your integrity and keeping your word and going about things with authenticity and kindness. He had so many people probably harassing him. And my take was like, what do I want? I wouldn't want someone like in my face and like an expectation, and so he appreciated it. And after that, honestly, in years to come, when we would have dinners with other people, or even if it was like he introduced me to everyone, to Randy Jackson, and he took, I got into the Neverland Ranch and all of these things, and it was because of him, because of that trust. And I never betrayed that, so I think that that's a big part of it. And I've definitely noticed that over the years. Like, my children will even notice that. They'll be like, "Mom, how come everyone's always telling you things?" And I'm like, because I don't share other people's business. It's not my place to share it. And even if you become my enemy tomorrow and we never speak again, I still have no business sharing what you shared with me in confidence.
And then you've gone on to produce so many different docuseries. And I feel like, with 9 Lives of, like, you capture this human story in the most compelling way where there's a rise and a fall and a rise again. How do you do that? Keep the objectivity, the authenticity, kind of tell the story through that lens.
I think you want to have your story really show the good, bad, and the ugly of a situation, but with hope, with silver linings throughout. So what I like about it is even someone like, I don't know, Pee Wee Herman, who that was probably one of my favorite episodes because he spent his whole life so authentically trying to be himself, but he couldn't really be himself. And I think that to tell a story with someone's layers and nuances is what really captures the audience, because we are all layered and nuanced. And so it's the point that you can connect with. Like, what can you connect with? Like when you think of Sex in the City, right? That's like a really good example. Like we are all women have a little bit of each of like each of us have a Carrie, a Samantha, a Miranda, and Charlotte in us.
Right.
And that's what they're capturing, right? And so when you watch something, even if it's a horror flick or whatever you're watching, oftentimes the ones that you relate to the most are when you can see a little tiny bit of yourself in it.
Yes, so true. So true. And I mean, being in this business, I feel like you just treat others like you would a friend, It's like there's no divide between celebrity or nobody's holier than thou. We're all the same.
I agree with you. But I think that's the best. Those are the only people I want in my life, by the way.
Right.
Like I don't want, right? If I'm with a friend who is a celebrity, let's say, and she or he treats someone else at a restaurant or whatever, like lower than them, I'm out.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't need you because you don't know where you're going to be in life at any point. That's the truth.
So true.
You might be my boss tomorrow, which I'd be grateful for. I'd love you as my boss, but you might be my boss tomorrow. So why would you operate as if you're so great? Like when you rise, oftentimes you fall, and vice versa. When you fall, you rise,
Yes, it's so true. If we're climbing that ladder up, I know we're reaching one hand back to help some other woman get up there with us, and I think that's so important too, because it's lonely at the top.
For me, the two things that I feel like we as a society do not spend enough time on, which I think are the key takeaways that we're losing sight of: community and something bigger than us, like that spirituality. And I think we're all missing that a little bit. Generalization. We have it in bits, but it's not our focus point, right? If tomorrow you're like, Falguni, you have a choice between walking down the street and having tea with your friend or going to do a yoga workout, guess what I'm going to choose? The yoga workout, because I'm like, oh my God, I didn't get my workout. And I got to get, that's on my to-do list. And I am really interested in this. I'm really interested in when we're driving, like you have to build your tribe. You have to have your community. That's the thing that's going to keep us young. And, we're going to have that longevity. I don't want to be old and decrepit and tired and whatever by myself.
So you and Richard met in Secaucus?
Yeah. In fact, so MSNBC was in Secaucus, New Jersey. I started working there in 2001, as you know, and then 3 months later, 9/11 happened, which is what catapulted my entire career because I was the only grown-up in the room who knew how to answer the phones and be calm and not freak out, even though I was definitely freaking out because it was obviously a horrible, horrible day. A year later or 2 years later, he saw me walking around the newsroom and he was like, he thought I was the boss, and he came over to me and whatever, we started talking. But what's funny about it is that he always likes to say we were able to find love even in the parking lot of Secaucus. He calls it Secaucus.
I know. Most people do.
Yeah. So that's when he tells my kids, our kids, he's like, Mommy and I met in Secaucus, New Jersey. I'm like, okay. He made a story. I'll share this story with you later. It's called The Night Rain Falls on Secaucus because he kissed me for the first time in the parking lot in Secaucus.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Tell us about then your motherhood journey, having kids, because that's a whole other metamorphosis.
Honestly, it truly is. And I had my kids at 37 and 39. Which is later in life. We had a hard time getting pregnant. And then I even had a miscarriage before having him. And at the time, actually, I had gotten pregnant. I found out I was pregnant at Obama's inauguration, which was it was an amazing moment because I was there and my husband came with me and I was covering one of the balls. And it was probably one of my career highs of all time, with Ann Curry covering the inauguration, flown out to DC, the whole gamut. And we had been trying to get pregnant for a while, or it seems like a while, but actually when I think back, it was 6 months, but
okay.
And so I remember we were at the inauguration and I don't eat meat. I've never had meat in my life, but there was a pile of bacon and I was with a colleague of mine and I was like, oh my God, that bacon looks amazing. And he was like, he goes, "You never had bacon, right?" I was like, "No, never had meat." He was like, "Honey, you're pregnant." I was like, "What? No." And then I took a test when I was there, and I was like, so I found out I was pregnant.
Oh my
Not
God.
with my current son, but so then I came back and we were so excited, and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm pregnant." And then I got assigned the Octomom story. And so I was there all the time trying to find the Octomom. I found out who she was. Like, I was all over that story, and I hadn't told anyone at my company. This is an important story to tell just because I feel like a lot of people go through these struggles silently and don't share it. But I found out I was pregnant. I hadn't told anyone in my company. And then I booked her for NBC. It was a huge get. It was so competitive. I was working all the time. And Curry was flying out to do this interview. And the morning of the interview, I miscarried.
Oh,
And then I had to tell everybody because I couldn't be like, "I have a cold, I can't go."
right.
And the whole company knew that I had a miscarriage because all the bosses were involved in this story because it was like a big story. And then they call me back at a certain point, like I took some time off, but then they call me back to do interviews. And that was really hard for me. But I didn't tell anyone because here's a woman who had 8 babies. And why? Like, right? Just because she wanted to. And I like had just lost my baby. So that was a really, really, really hard time. But then you know what? We got pregnant like 3 or 4 months later with my son. Then my daughter was like a first time. So you never know what's going to happen. There are moments where I feel like I have to stop myself from projecting all of my crap onto my kids. And that's, I think, my biggest learning. I'm always like, and I'm very honest with them. Like, even things about, like, with my daughter, I'm very aware of all the stuff that was put on us about weight.
Yeah.
And it's so hard, it's so hard to differentiate. Like last night, she's like, "Mom, can I have some dessert?" And I was like, "No, babe, you just had some banana nut bread. Like, you don't want to have too much dessert." She's like, "Oh, okay, because you think I'm like getting fat." And I was like, "No."
Oh, yeah.
But it's really hard, and we have to be very aware with our girls, like, about that, because I know for me, my mom was very hard on me about weight, and I tell her sometimes, "Please check me. Please check me if you hear me saying unkind things to myself, right?
Right.
And please check me because I don't want to pass this along." And so I think that that's the other thing, like, I am finding as I keep going with my children that the more open I am about my own struggles with certain things and how I want and why, the why behind why I'm asking them not to eat chocolate or not to do this or whatever, the more we're able to communicate about it. Obviously, after a certain age, like a 3-year-old is going to be like, "Just give it to me," and throw a tantrum. But I am finding that to be very true. And I think with my son, I'm hyper aware that this is his generation is going to be the lost generation of boys because we have spent a lot of time overcorrecting with our girls and helping them feel like rebel girls and girl power. And now our boys are left very confused. They're like, "Wait, what about me?" So I am really trying my best. This is my new passion, honestly, Kanika, is like, what can I do? How can I do this? What can I do to help him feel seen, but also help him understand that he needs to be a feminist,
Yeah, he has his place in the world. The idea is to be treading the middle ground. We don't want the pendulum to swing so far the other way.
What I am seeing, honestly, and in having conversations with my son, especially, because, sometimes he now tells me, like, he doesn't want me to he's like, "Why are you wearing that?" Like, when it's a bikini or something, like, it gets very uncomfortable. Because, they're probably doing the jokes that, "Oh, I think your mom's hot." Like, remember when we were young? We were like, but one of the things I actually talked to him about was about the male gaze, right? So I said, "Listen, but you're not going to want to hear this, but when I was younger, I had breasts at like 11, like your sister's age, and boys were the height of me, like my chest. So they would stare." And I was like, it made me feel really bad, son. I felt really horrible. I felt there was something wrong with me because I didn't understand it. I didn't have anyone to talk to about it either. I wasn't like talking to my mom about that. I want you to know that you're not creepy for wanting to look at a woman's chest. That's not creepy, actually. That your hormones are saying to you, wow, that looks good to me, right? I was like, there's nothing creepy about that. I said, what becomes creepy is if you stare too long, because I need you to understand how that makes the other person feel. That's the connection. And I think that that's my role, is like to connect that for him. Like, look, as your mom, that's how I felt. I felt uncomfortable. So if you sit there and you stare too long at a girl's boobs, she's going to be like, and then you're going to feel creepy. And then that's the cycle.
Oh my God. I love how you frame that. Speaking of which, tell us about Getting Hotter, because that is just the ultimate collective for women. And, it's about talking about, modern menopause, how we're going to go through this together.
You know what's interesting about Getting Hotter? So Ruthie, my friend, and I started this in 2019, I believe. And it was when we both realized, like, wow, or 2019, 2020, we were both like, wow, we were going through menopause. We didn't share it with each other. We're the best of friends. And then we really started to try to build out this community space for women to come to, more like a girlfriend's guide. And what we found is a lot of women still felt reticent about sharing and talking about it. But like all things, what I'm finding recently, there's been a resurgence again of women wanting to talk about it again and wanting to know more and asking the questions. And it's cool because I have even more knowledge now. And so we did notice that there was a gap in the information for, brown women. And because a lot of our symptoms are different, a lot of what we go through is different, but also brown women, Asians, the culturally is just different. And so we have leaned into that too. So I think I've shared this with you, but for example, I'm not as interested in vaginal dryness as I'm interested in mental health and anxiety, because that's a lot of what we see. And a lot of times you'd go to the doctor and you'd say, I feel really anxious. I'm not sleeping at night. I don't know what's going on. And they're like, well, are you depressed? Do you need medication? And it's, in retrospect, it's like, no, I need hormones, or I need more guidance because I need you to tell me that this is what's happening to my body. But there are a lot more tools these days, which is so great for people going through menopause or perimenopause. Things have shifted tremendously from 2019 till now. I mean, I'm not as interested in the products as I am about the information. There's a lot more information. Your doctors should know more information. You can get a lot of testing done. You hear a lot of women talk about how they're weightlifting now more. And it's funny because obviously age-old concept, but it is important for us, right? It's important to lift. It's important to meditate. It's important to do yoga to keep our muscles limber, to take our vitamin D, to get those, there's a lot of technology to get tested, for osteoporosis and all this as you start to lose your hormones. And P.S., at the end of it all, you just know who you are. The wisdom that comes with all of this is amazing this season in your life, because, hey, we're all going to go through this, and that's okay too. And it's a club. It's our Getting Hotter club.
Yeah, I love what you named it. I mean, because I think that's the first thing you hear is oh, you're going to get these hot flashes, but there's so much more. And honestly, I feel like women just look gorgeous.
Honestly, I was looking at pictures of myself from before, and I never really appreciate it. They always say, oh, you look back and youth is wasted on the young and all of that. But I'm I told my husband the other day, I'm I'm good with now. I am good right now. I love Falguni right now. And I heard this thing on a podcast the other day, this interview that I was preparing for. And the guy said, with our kids, and this is a really good takeaway, especially for something that's total mom sense, right? With our kids, if someone asked you, why do you love your son? Why do you love your daughter? You'd say, because I love them, right? They're mine. I love them because they're mine. And why don't we do that with ourselves? We don't list off. I don't say I love Anaya because she is so soulful and she is so beautiful and she is such a good, I don't do that. I'm I love Anaya because she's my daughter. Why don't we do that with ourselves? I am mine. Falguni is hers. So I don't have to like everything about myself all the time to love myself.
Is there a mom sense moment? By that, I mean a time that you trusted your intuition and it just steered you on the right path.
my husband, catapulted everything because I took a huge risk. I mean, I didn't know, I knew we liked each other. I knew we had fallen in love, but we were in a long distance relationship. I gave NBC 5 months notice and I'm like, I am leaving. I'm leaving. I hope you can help me find a job, either you keep me or not. Like, I didn't know what was going to happen with that. I just decided to move to LA. I was like, I'm just going to up and leave. There was nothing wrong with my life in New York. And when I look back, like everyone's like, oh, you were so brave because I wasn't engaged. I lived by myself when I moved here. I had no base except for him. I met him in New York. We were together in New York for like a week, like when we were actually dating before he moved back to LA.
Wow.
So our whole romance was like long distance, whirlwind, hot, steamy because we're not in the same place all the time,
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
That was the best. I'm like, can we have separate houses now that we're married? But I think that allowed me to continue to trust my instincts all along once that, and that's what it was. It wasn't that I was brave. I mean, yes, I was brave, but what it was is that I was listening to my gut.
Yes, you just trusted. We're the same, by the way, because I left India for Sunil. It was later that I was like, are we boyfriend and girlfriend? But there was already like this long distance, like keeping in touch, WhatsApps, BBMs, like all that I just felt that it's like, no, it's time. And there's something going on here.
And maybe, maybe some of it is that we are authentically ourselves. Maybe that's how our paths are so parallel and vibrant because every turn can be an opportunity or not. And like we choose to look at it as an opportunity maybe. And we have a curiosity. Like as you're talking to me, I'm like, I have so many questions for you right now. And I'm like, oh no, wait, she's interviewing me. Stop. Pause.
Yes. I know. I'm just like giving context, but yeah, no, this is about you. Life is just one big trust fall sometimes.
What's interesting is that when I am meeting new parents, like I ran into a dad to be the other day, and he's like, do you have any advice? And I laughed, and he's like, why are you laughing? And I was like, honestly, the only advice I give, and even when I have to write it on those little cards and when I'm at a baby shower, whatever, which I haven't been to one in ages, is don't listen to anybody else. You're the only one that's going to know. You're the only one that's going to know. You can read all the books and like how to train your baby to sleep and all this crap, and it's fine because you're scared. And so knowledge is power when you're scared. But the truth is that the moments that I served my children the best was when I was like, quiet my mind. What is like my soul telling me is the right move?
So on to our rapid fire. Something you love about yourself.
I love that I'm nerdy and people don't always know it. I could sit for hours doing puzzles and I'm a Scrabble whiz and like I love word things, connections and all the different games.
That's so cool. Biggest pet peeve?
People having a scarcity mindset.
That's a good one. Someone you'd like to have dinner with, dead or alive?
The Obamas. I know it's not someone.
Let's see. A song you have on repeat.
Dreams by the Cranberries.
Aww. Oh my God, what a throwback. A book that changed your life?
This one's a funny one, but it's called The Yamas and the Niyamas. And it's actually like a yoga book, but it really talks about, I don't know, how to live. Like I read it over and over again because it has so many truths in it. You know what I mean? So many moments that, I don't know, encapsulate a lot for me. And I would say the other one is Many Masters, Many Lives, because I really love books and thoughts and ideas of anything that's bigger than me. I like to look at life that way too. Like when something is bothering me or whatever, it's like life is bigger than me, but also life is big.
And then the last thing is your mantra that you live by.
I often say that like if you quiet your mind, long enough to like really listen to the drumbeat of your soul, that's when like you can go everywhere you want to. Like you can do no wrong. Like you just have to listen to yourself. Life is really big. Like life is so big. Like, in those moments that you feel sad or you feel like if someone's not nice to you or whatever, it's like, it's okay. Life is so big. Like just go out there. Like look at the sun. Look at, life is big. It really does inspire me. Like I want to live an aspirational life.
That's incredible. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This is just like the most heartfelt chat ever. Where can my audience find you, support you, all the things?
I'm at Producer Mama on Instagram and at Getting Hotter Official for our menopause, which I think we're going to really start adding more things to because I know people are interested in it. And on LinkedIn, I'm Falguni Adams.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. I hope you got some great takeaways from our conversation. Join my community by logging on to thatstotalmomsense.com. If you haven't already, please subscribe to That's Total Mom Sense, the podcast, wherever you listen, and be sure to rate and review. On socials, my handle is at Kanika Chadda Gupta on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and X. You can also find me on LinkedIn. My episode videos are on YouTube and YouTube podcasts with highlights on YouTube Shorts. Write to me at thatstotalmomsense@gmail.com. My team and I read all your pitches and feedback and are so glad to be in touch. Remember, always trust your mom sense and dad sense. Stay strong, super parents. See you soon.